All right, let's get right to our panel as we analyze the Garland nomination to the Supreme Court. We start with Brad Gersman, political consultant and founding partner of Gotham Government Relations. Dominic Carter is a journalist and author. We're also joined by former Democratic New Jersey Congressman Steve Rothman. Welcome back, sir. And Mark Furnish is here. He's a professor at Brooklyn Law and has argued before the U.S. Supreme Court. Mark, let me start with you. Give me a sense of Garland's sensibilities. What do we know about him from his rulings?
Well, he seems to be a very, very straight shooter, not the sexiest or most high wattage guys of the other names we've heard bandied about, but extremely capable, competent, not an ideologue. We've heard centrist, moderate. All those things seem to be true. Not a person who's politically motivated, seems to decide cases on the law and the facts. Very difficult to discern from the cases that I've read any hard and fast ideological stance.
So this is not a guy we can comb through his rulings and say, well, we know he was going to vote on abortion or on this?
I don't think that you can comb through the rulings, but the high-profile cases, he was on a panel that voted for the D.C. Circuit Court, the court that he's coming from, to reconsider the Heller case. So if you want to extrapolate from that, not as pro-Second Amendment or not as expansive a view of the Second Amendment as we see right now, has voted in a case to uphold campaign finance restrictions against donations by government contractors. So maybe not full bore in favor of a Citizens United type perspective. Voted on cases to expand habeas corpus rights for Guantanamo, alleged enemy combatants, things like that.
This is easily a much different pick from President Obama than Sotomayor or Kagan?
Well, Kagan was the SG, so she had argued so many cases before the court, and she had no paper trail in terms of a judicial record, and it's perilous to extrapolate from a position somebody argues to what they write. He has an extensive paper record as D.C. Circuit Judge dating back to 1997, so they'll vet and comb through the rulings, but he doesn't wave a flag one way or the other.
And now to the politics of everything, and Congressman, I sense the difference between the Sotomayor and Kagan nominations versus Merrick Garland gives me the sense that this maybe wasn't the guy President Obama really in his heart wanted to nominate. There's more politics involved in all this. He doesn't think he can get this guy through. Is that a misread from your standpoint?
I can understand why you say that, but at the end of the day, one wants to cross the goal line to score the touchdown and win the game. And in this sense, to win the game, to have the Supreme Court of the United States actually vote along one's philosophical or ideological bent, that's the goal. Now, the Republicans and conservatives have had their kind of Supreme Court now for many, many years. When Justice Scalia passed away, it provided an opportunity for more centrist and arguably more left-leaning Supreme Court to come into being. So would President Obama wanted someone with more extreme left-wing credentials than the person he nominated? Perhaps, but at the end of the day, he wanted someone who was a centrist, slightly left, to take the ball over the goal line and shift this court that gave us Citizens United and Bush v. Gore a different tilt, more centrist, perhaps more left-wing, more progressive, in line, I would argue, with the majority of Americans.
Certainly further left in the composition of the court now, but we're talking about a 62-year-old who, if you look down the long range, probably doesn't stay on the court as long as certainly a younger nominee might, not as far left. There's going to be some unhappy
Andrew,
Democrats
can I interrupt
out there.
right now?
Yes, you can.
We're talking as if this individual is going to gain the nomination. Yeah, it is a total fiction. Nothing is happening. Right. And Barack Obama, in trying to get over the goal line, if you will, decided he was going to put someone who might be tolerable to the right, to the people that have been trying to take him down ever since he started his presidency. They aren't going to let anybody get on this Supreme Court during his presidency. No more, no how, no way. So for the president to choose this middle-of-the-road individual, so to speak, makes no sense. He should have picked somebody who he truly wanted to in his heart, a true-blown liberal, and then let them reject the liberal, and then make it election fodder for Hillary Clinton.
See, I think that was the point. I think Brad's entirely right. This is a purely academic discussion because they've made it crystal clear that nobody's getting on the court.
That's all this is.
But Hillary Clinton, who's a gifted politician, well, not a gifted politician, But you know, she'll be able to make some real hay out of this on the campaign trail by saying, look, he bent over backwards to bring a centrist, a consensus builder, somebody who's impeccably credentialed, wholly unobjectionable, and look, they obstructed and stalled this. How can you trust these people to continue to control Congress, or God forbid, give them control of the White House for the next 4 years? So I think it's to show them up more than anything else.
And in building on what's been said, this is also about gaining back seats in the U.S. Senate from the Republican Party, because a number of the national polls show that a slight majority of Americans want the Republican-controlled Senate to give this nominee a hearing and a vote. And while it may not be a big deal in the presidential election that's going to come in 8 months, when these senators, these Republican senators who refuse to give the president's nominee, which he made under this nomination under the constitutional authority, to give this nominee even a hearing, let alone a vote, that may well influence some of the Senate races and allow the Democrats to take control of the Senate.
And so the question becomes, Andrew, why would Judge Garland play with something where he cannot win? I agree with the point. I mean, we're talking like, I mean, he has maybe a 10% chance, and I'm being optimistic, of actually going over your term, over the goal line and making it to the Supreme Court. But chances are it's not going to happen. This is an act of politics. It's an act of trying to energize the base, to say, look, you know, look at what these guys are doing to Obama. But of course, the Republicans will say, well, look at what the vice president, what he said when it was. So the president was right today when he said we're just going to keep going back and forth between the parties. Garland, Judge Garland, it's a no-lose situation for him to go for, because why would you do this? Because
he's got a job. He's got a job.
Right, but he's been to the dance before. Keep this in mind. Twice. In
It's
terms
worth a
of,
shot, though.
Right.
I mean, from an individual
he's
standpoint, you want to
dance.
believe.
I just want to get this on the
Go ahead,
record.
sorry.
He's been to the dance before in terms of going through the process, but Obama went with someone else. So Judge Garland has nothing to lose, but chances are he's not going to make it to the court.
If President Obama was playing to the base, he would have nominated somebody from
a black woman.
Okay.
And then let the Senate, let the Republicans reject a black woman, and then make hay during the election and turn out the base and try to get some wins for the Democrats.
But I don't think this is a play to the base. I think this is a play to independents, to the middle.
I think it's a play to the independents in the middle. It's also a play to the Senate to try to regain the Senate. But there's also another theory, which goes that if Hillary Clinton is the nominee of the Democrats and wins the election, that the Republican senators may yet approve Garland in lame duck in November of 2016, December 2016, because he's a centrist, fearing that President Hillary Clinton would deliver them someone far worse, far more to the left.
And that's what Hatch said exactly that today, that he wasn't ruling out the possibility of an up or down vote after the election. You know, be careful what you wish for, you just might get it.
I want to take a wider angle on this, because last night we had a Republican strategist on the show who noted correctly that this is a generational shift in the Supreme Court, that this impacts the nation for 20, 30 years. But that was her way of saying we don't want any Democrat, anybody who's going to shift the court appreciably to the left. This is not I would argue this is not the center-right nation that it was when Reagan appointed Scalia, when Reagan appointed Thomas. It's a moderate nation, or it's, if anything, a center-left nation. And so why shouldn't the president, and again, I know the political realities, Dominic.
Because you could talk about what that's like when we talk about polls that mean absolutely nothing. It's a complete waste of time.
I disagree with you.
It sounds like this is a Trump nation. I mean, center left, center right. I mean, we have so many people on both sides. I don't want to sound like Donald Trump, but there are people, Democrats and Republicans, who want Donald Trump.
But
this is completely off the map right now.
Look at the progression of social issues in this country, whether it's same-sex marriage or something else, whether it's police-community relations. This Supreme Court is not in line with the opinion on key issues as the voters are.
Here's the thing, though. It doesn't have to be in line with anything. The bottom line is the people of this country gave Obama a mandate for 8 years. And in that 8-year period, one of the things they gave him a mandate to do was to nominate a Supreme Court justice, irrespective of how much time is or is not left in his term. People should have thought about it, and maybe they did, the consequences of voting for Obama in terms of the Supreme Court before the election. But to hold this up now, there's really no good faith reason for the Republicans to do it, and I'm not a fan of Barack Obama. This is his job. Their job is to give advice and consent. That doesn't mean refuse to vote or refuse to consider. That means vote on it and give it an up or down, regardless of the politics involved.
Is there a court action? Is there a court action that can be taken
I don't,
if they absolutely refuse, even if they're walking down the road, making believe, doing that kind of stuff? Can they? Is there a court action to compel?
I cannot imagine the U.S. Supreme Court getting in the middle of this, especially if the U.S. Senate decides they don't have time for it or they don't wish to. By the way, I think the U.S. Senate, the Republican leadership and the majority there are wrong. This gentleman deserves a hearing and they deserve a vote. But Barack Obama is a very cagey, competitive guy. He never wants to give up the possibility of victory. And Dominic said there's a 10% chance.
There is.
And when if he appointed, or rather nominated, a far left person, that would have been a 0% chance.
Right.
So Obama gave a nominee well qualified by both sides of the aisle's reckoning. And a 10% chance is possible, and you never know in politics.
The Republicans would have put up a right-winger, and they would have just stuck their finger in your nose and just said, that's that.
You never know in politics when people will be shamed into doing the correct thing. And that was part of Obama's strategy. Maybe the Republicans will hear enough from their constituents and the American people that they'll worry that they'll lose Senate seats, and they'll give this guy a hearing and a vote and take the consequences.
It's a win-win. Because he has the best chance of anybody Obama could have picked to actually get through. And if he doesn't get through, Clinton will blast them in the general, saying they won't even consider a moderate. So it's a no-lose proposition.
But if he actually gets through, then Obama may have
They're
left
already
something on the
painting
table
him not
there.
as a moderate, obviously for good reason.
Okay, we're going to take a break. Up next, Donald Trump saying the RNC in Cleveland will be a tension convention if the Republican Party tries to block his nomination there. Donald saying it could even turn really ugly like what happened in Chicago in 1968.